Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Chef Joseph, the entrepreneur, back at you again. Welcome back to the Chef Joseph's Kick Sauce for Entrepreneurs channel. Welcome back to the Chef Joseph's Kick Sauce for Entrepreneurs channel. Man, today is 2/18/2026, February 18th, 2026. Man, second month into the new year. Man, today is an exciting day for me, and I have been talking about something for a while that, I've been kind of hinting to something about me doing some writing and things like that. Just writing and actually writing my book. And actually, when I look back, I didn't realize, I was reminded that I had started this project 2 years ago. And I was like, man, 2 years really flies by, you know what I'm saying? But I'm finally at the end, finished. And I told you that once I did finish, that I would basically be discussing, telling you about it, about the book, and, just kind of giving you an overview for those of you all who want to purchase or would like to purchase. Man, so yes, before I present my information to you, I want you all to know that if you have a story inside of you, you should consider writing it. You know what I'm saying? Because, we all have been through a lot. You have experiences that other people can glean from. I can tell you that when I started on my journey many years ago, I never had any idea of what it led to, or where it would lead to. I did not know. I just kept walking. But however, it's all documented in the book. No maliceness, no nothing. It's the whole Chef Joseph story. So for you all that are entrepreneurs that have been through a lot, or just you don't even have to be an entrepreneur. It's just, but my thing is, God give us business, give us ability to get wealth, etc. And the only way you can really do that, in my opinion, is through creating some type of product or service for yourself. You know, and then in my case, I've done that. And then of course that spun into a whole narrative of a story that I did not expect to happen. And I'm very, very pleased to talk about it today. So the project, my autobiography is finished. And for those of you who all don't know what an autobiography is, it means a book, a full-fledged book about your story, an autobiography about your life. And so I'm here to present it to you today. Okay. Here is my book. It's going to be a little backwards. I mean, I guess with the screenplay, you won't be able to read everything, but it's the title of my book, and this is the book cover. It's called "He Came During the Civil War." You see the Chef Joseph's, and then it's a little backwards, of course, but he came during the Civil War. And some of you all may say, and this is the title, "The Chef Joseph's Kick Sauce Story." And some of you all may like, how in the world, why would it, how would you tie Chef Joseph's into the Civil War? And in 1859, true story now. So, so to talk about what has happened, let's see, man, it's all in the book. So I'm kind of giving you a play-by-play, just of what you will read once you dive into the book. You'll see how I was able to acquire the Chef Joseph's company and literally built it from zero. Built it from zero. And literally through homelessness, everything, couldn't find a job. I got fired from 11 jobs. Well, I couldn't find a job, one, because I had a felony on my record back in '99. Okay, it's been many, 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 many moons ago over something that really happened. I was a young man. Okay, cool, big deal. So, but that's been expunged and all that stuff. So, but it's nothing major. It's not anything, out of the range. It just happened, something that happened to me when I was in my 20s. Wrong place at the wrong time. Cool. But I was able to pivot and turn that into success. I'm not afraid of it whatsoever. However, I talk about in the book, he came during the Civil War, because this story ultimately is not about me. It is about me, but it's actually not. Because later I found out that my second great grandfather was actually a chef in the Civil War in 1859, 166 years ago. And that's why it's titled He Came During the Civil War. Because when people would ask me, like, man, how are you so innovative? Like, it's like, what is this drive? And it just came to me, I guess he came during the Civil War, because his blood is in me. He is in me and I am in him. That's my second great grandfather by bloodline. His name was Albert Anderson, and he's actually in a museum. Not his body in particular, but his swords, all the pictures as far as being with the Sons of the Confederate Army. He was actually a cook. And the story is phenomenal, and it's in the book, so I don't want to give you a spoiler alert. But I do want to go over some of the chapters that are in here. It is a full autobiography, so it's not going to be a quick manual. It's basically how I got to where I'm at today, and some of the things that happened that caused me to push me into a certain level of success. Which is my God-given right, which is your God-given right. Everybody has the God-given right to walk into their success. And later, how I cashed all of that success in, because it was about generations, about the generations that were coming behind me. So I was smart enough to say, you know what, I'm out of this. Yes, I built something, but no, it's a whole other entity within its own self. You know what I'm saying? I just kind of just do what I do and make sure things are cool. That's all. So anyway, this is what the book cover will look like. You will find this on Amazon and everywhere, pretty much on now platforms. But however, he came during the Civil War. So let me read. I know some of you all can't read the fine print because the camera's upside down or backwards. But it says, this is the story of a once homeless man who turned himself into a full-time entrepreneur by selling his hot sauce out the trunk of his car. He later became a chef and connected with his second great grandfather, who was also a chef in the Civil War in 1859. True story. The Chef Joseph's Kicksall story. That's what it says at the bottom here. So that is my full story. And to those of you all who may not know about autobiographies, when you're writing an autobiography about your life, about your story, this is, you go through a lot of emotional stuff, actually, because you're digging up your past, everything that you went through, things that you have buried, things that you say, you know what, I'm moving on, and, and I don't want to be a part, I just want to move on with my life. And so some of you have, you tend to bury those memories, bury those hurts, bury those traumas, you bury those things, and you don't ever really think about revisiting them, and some of these things can be traumatizing, and but years later, when the Most High instills in you, hey, maybe I should put this into a book, and then yeah, it's something to consider. Because I know this story in particular, the first 6 chapters, I had to dig back into about 20 something years of history. Like, that's, like 26 years I had to go back into my mind frame and basically dig up hurts, letdowns, all these things. But I never knew that later become, uh, uh, they would become a pillar or a brick into my success as an entrepreneur, as a person of the Most High, and when I was put down and ostracized and kicked to the curb, what I'm saying? It was like I never knew that those experiences would play into a bigger part in my life, such as this book. Okay. So I encourage y'all, if you have a story, go ahead and start writing it. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead and write your story, tell your story, you know what I'm saying? Because I know for me, I've held in a truth for 26 years. And some of you all it's 26 years, you all may not see the significance, or you may not see the big deal in that. But I was literally estranged from my own daughter, period. Not because I was a bad person, not because I've done anything wrong to jeopardize anything with any children. No, I had a vindictive mother who literally kept me away from her. She falsely accused me of putting hands where they shouldn't have been, on 2 occasions, which were all lies. My grandmother was like, you know what, you need to sue her, but you know what, but no. Social services was like, you need to sue her. And then I went to my mother and my grandmother at that time. It's like, no, you don't sue her. Let the Lord handle it. Yeah, because the story tells how they came up into my barbershop, the authorities. They literally were trying to. She tried to frame me for something I did not do, and that's for real, for real. And so when people may look at why Daddy wasn't there, you know what I'm saying? It was because of the mother, all the way. And I have witnesses, and I have letters to prove all this. But anyway, that's not the conversation for today. That is just one of the things that it was one of the bricks that were burned into my psyche to basically help develop this full autobiography story. So let's talk about the table of contents, okay? So of course we're talking about he came during the Civil War. That's the Chef Joseph story. Yeah, true story. And when you read about who my second great grandfather was, yo, I understand clearly why, I'm on this path. You know what I'm saying? And it's a beautiful thing. So let's talk about the table of contents, okay? I'm just gonna kind of give you, let me see. It's actually 26 chapters because it's a full autobiography. So since it's a full autobiography, I cover, 26 chapters of my life. And just know, like, when you see or read this book, you get it. I do get into the chefing piece. I get into the other spaces that I walked into with this particular operation. But it was really my whole story of how I became into success, of a bunch of letdowns. So, however, chapter one. Okay, so we talk about it was on Halloween night. Um, it says the night that forever changed my life. Halloween night. So yeah, something happened on Halloween night that forever changed my life, and it's all in the book. And then number two, going through that whole probation experience, you know, um, some of the things that I've seen when I went through that, it was my first time even getting into any trouble, So anyway, I was kind of, let go of the smack on the wrist type of thing. But that whole experience of being, charged and booked and being put on probation, which I was 26 years old, maybe. Yes, 20, 30, 40, almost 30 years ago. Okay, cool. All right, and then chapter three, losing my daughter through a one-sided narrative and manipulation. And the subtitle is A Father's Side of the Story That Has Never Been Told. Then you got chapter four, the pain that forced the child, that forced the father to sit on the sidelines, the pain that forced me to sit on the sideline and silently watch as my daughter grew up when I had no voice, you know. And then, of course, I always want to be in her life. The child's mother's words of negativity. These are broken down into three chronicles. And so you have three chronicles of why I wasn't there. And I broke this down to a subcategory called A Tales of a Broken Father, Chronicle 1, Chronicle 2, and Chronicle 3. So this is a whole series of events of like 6 chapters worth of what was done to me. And I will never let go of that story. But I never knew that it actually pushed me into my level of success as I have walked in today, respectfully. Okay, so when I went through all that stuff, you know, one day I was at one of the libraries, and this title was called "The Day That the Tall, Gray-Bearded Man Showed Up at the Library," and just giving you give you a little synopsis of what happened. So I was in the library one day. I was probably, Alex, I was 20 something years old, and I was just burnt out, tired, just trying to figure it out. My daughter was just born in the year 1999, pretty much 1990 actually, around that time, and the year 1990 that is. And then a tall man came and sat in the library right beside me, and he wanted me to help him on the computer. And that later turned out into him becoming my mentor for about 7 years until he passed. And so he was the person that believed in me. Not that my father was a bad person, but he was a man that believed in me and taught me about entrepreneurship. And so that's the man that changed and rerouted the course of my life. And then with his help, I was able to start my first barbershop. So I became a barber later, and then had a salon and everything. And of course, building clientele and stuff like that. I've been through that whole experience. And then while I was at that pinnacle, transportation business, all that's in the book, when I went through all of that, what ended up happening was that's when the false allegations came from the child's mother. that she falsely did this to me, which I had been talking about, but it's actually written, and it will live. These words will live beyond me. And my daughter, one day, and I will say to you directly, that these are the first 6 chapters are dedicated to you, and you will know the truth of what all this was, how it happened. So you'll know that your dad was never a deadbeat. I was just never able to be there because of your mother and other sources around. Yes, dad made some mistakes. We all make mistakes, but this was something that was, regardless of what you've done, you still have the right to be in that child's life. Okay, cool. So that chapter number 9 is called her final attempt to destroy me. So that was her final attempt to destroy me. Then I talk about chapter 10 of how my mentor passed away, and then he knew that I needed closure. Chapter 10 and chapter 11. So it goes into that how we were so close, and he wasn't there by my side anymore. And what ended up happening was he came back to me in a dream, and it is a real, it's real, man. It's a real good chapter, yo. He came back in the dream to talk to me, because I never said goodbye, because he had been gone. He had passed 5 days before I really realized he was gone, and then I took a ride down to his apartment and found out he was deceased, and so and I was lost, but yet he came back in the dream to fulfill that. Another chapter is called Unlocked. Um, that's basically when and the subtitle is How I Found Clarity Through Michael Jackson's Transitioning. Because I went through this whole thing when Michael Jackson transitioned. I gained clarity in what I seen, and the book will explain that to you. Yep, talks about how I transitioned and then moved to Virginia Beach, etc. At the time, yeah, moved to the beach and everything, and and I'm in and out. By the way, I'm not stationary here anyway, at the beach or whatever, but I'm definitely traveling in different spaces. And then of course I go into the homelessness because as a convicted felon at that time, you know years and years ago, yes, it was hard to get a job. People don't You don't understand what that's like until you have that stigma put on you at that time. You will never understand what that's like. You know what I'm saying? Because you won't be able to get a job. So when you got people expecting you to do certain or contribute certain financial obligations, well, if you can't find work and you can't eat, then you can end up homeless like I was. But I had a bigger plan for myself. See what I'm saying? So, and my plan was to climb out selling my hot sauce, and that's exactly what happened. Chef Joseph's kick sauce, period. And at this point, I relinquished a lot of that over, so that way, I can live my life and the legacy can live on. And then I talk about chapter 18, how I got off the streets through a special friend. That's chapter 18. Chapter 19, gaining traction, how Chef Joseph's leveled up. Um, and has a subtitle beneath that as well. And then I have a chapter 20, talking about balancing patterns and past traumas. Balancing behavioral patterns and past traumas. So that's chapter 20. And that's talking about some of the things that I went through, because when I had reached a certain level of success, I still had things that I had to look in the mirror and face. All right, we're almost done. Chapter 21. Chapter 21. Now came time for her to fly. The dark night of the soul. And so that was a whole experience that when the friend that believed in the business and how we worked together for us both to come out of homelessness, and came time for her to fly, and the night of the dark soul. And that's when I went through, and I had to face myself. And again, to those of you all who are not familiar with that term, you can actually look that up. It's actually a real situation, a spiritual experience that spiritual beings will go through. If you're brave enough to even walk through that type of thing. 22 is how a shoelace saved my life. Which, if you want to know about that, just scroll through this channel, and then you'll see it's the title of the video is How a Shoelace Saved My Life. And 24, when I arrived at the top of the mountain, looked down into the valley and seen how far I had climbed. And that's when I got to the certain level of the restaurant business, etc. And I looked at how far I climbed and asked myself, was it really worth it? You know what I'm saying? So I built a legacy. And then, of course, 25 is he came during the Civil War, the story of Albert Anderson, who was my second great grandfather in the Civil War. So this is the title of the book. This is the cover of the book. And so that will cover everything, his whole story, what he did in the Civil War. And he actually was a chef under a Captain Joseph Anderson. And I'm Darrell Anderson, Chef Joseph. So, yeah, so it was like 166 years later, I was carrying a vision of my second great grandfather, who was a chef under a Captain Joseph Anderson in the Civil War. And he fought in 3 battles. I won't say which ones they were because I'll leave that to you for you to read, so you can see for yourself. And then the last chapter is 26, Reflections and Final Conclusions. So basically, that's 3 sections of how the reflections and final conclusions. So one of the reflections is, how do I feel about being connected to this story? And that was like, how do I feel about it? And so I talk about that, my reflections, in the conclusion of, just being the one selected to be on this path. Because again, I started out homeless. I started out with a record years and years ago. Now I get into spaces with background checks and clearances. That's, yeah, many, many, many years ago. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, so it's like I've outlived all of that, and thank the Most High and God's grace that I was able to do that. And so, however, so the first one is, how do I feel about my reflections of this particular story. Number 2 is my reflections and conclusions of me being kicked or, well, alienated from my daughter's life. And I talk about that whole thing, and I even have a section in there for her mother, because she did this to me, which is irreparable damage. I cannot get those years back. Those are things that were done vindictively. And yes, my daughter, I definitely hope you read this book. Matter of fact, you will have a copy. Just know that. And so you can understand, as you become a woman and you understand that dad wasn't there, not because he didn't want to be. Yes, he had some issues, but guess what? Everyone does. But issues are nothing. I mean, you all have to grow. See what I'm saying? And so you've grown up with a side of a narrative which was totally not true. There was some truth to stuff, but the devil mixed truth with falsehood. You know what I'm saying? So, and then the last conclusion is about being connected to my second great grandfather. So again, I'm out of here. I'm at 22 minutes, and the title is "He Came During the Civil War." This is going to be the cover of the book, the Chef Joseph's Kicks Off story. Yep. There you go. So that is the whole story, what has driven me to where I'm at today. I am proud to say I've been here another year, another day to tell this story. And if I have any words, for you entrepreneurs, what I'm saying, keep pushing, believe in what you got, just keep pushing and write your stuff down, because you never know how your story can be, used to help other people. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to say peace out on that one. Like and subscribe to this channel, the Chef Joseph's Kicks Off for Entrepreneurs channel. And, but yeah, the book is about to drop. I have some dates coming soon, where you can find it on Amazon and all that kind of stuff. You can go to the website, all that's being built and everything. So you can be able to purchase a copy for yourself. It will be in ebook. It will be hardback and paperback. You know what I'm saying? So you'll be able to, and audio as well. So you'll be able to listen to it as well. But these are the true story. This is what I live for, to tell this story right here. And ironically, it wasn't all about me. It was about the things that happened to propel me into this, which catapulted me into something else bigger. And but yeah, very pleased. So thank you. Like the video. I'm out.